Hi everyone, in this course we will learn how to develop a web-based enterprise payroll software using the popular ASP.NET Core. ASP.NET Core is a web development framework. It is lightweight, cross-platform and easy to deploy, which makes it ideal for developing cloud-ready applications. My name is Everest. I am the instructor of this course. In this course, I will guide you on how to develop a real-world production-ready application from scratch. We will use industry-standard multi-layered architecture and best practices like dependency injection, which will give us a modular and loosely coupled application. We have a lot to cover in this course, so if you're ready, let's get started. So this is a demo of our fully functional application that we developed in this course. So our application, we have 4 layers. We have the presentation layer, we have the entity layer, and we also have the persistence layer. And finally, we have the services layer. And this folder contains the implementation of our interfaces. So now I'm going to run this application. So this application contains 2 main sections. We have the employee section, we have the payroll section. So let's take a look at the list of all employees. So that prompts us to log in, and that is simply because we need to be authenticated to gain access to this application. Login. So this is the employee list page. We can go here to create a new employee. So that brings us to this page where we can create a new employee. If we click on save, we get our validation error message. Okay, so we need to add some data. So even though we have an input, but our input does not match our regular expression, so I'm gonna put something that will match our regular expression, and that validates. So I'm gonna check that record. So this is the employee we just added, Kevin Johnson, and this list is ordered by full name. So it is ordered alphabetically by full name. That is why this record is here. Okay, so another thing that we implemented in this employee list is, instead of having a scrollable list of employees, we had to add pagination. So pagination is a sequential order of pages, so which allows us to paginate through the employee list records. Okay, back to the beginning. So we also have the following actions. We can edit an employee's records. You will also notice that some of these records are grayed out, so you can't edit the employee's number, you can't edit the employee's first name, middle name, last name. You can't edit the employee's date of birth. and also the national insurance number. So these are unique. Okay, so of course you can change the employee's mobile number, and we can change this employee's job role. So we can update this to, so let's say deputy manager. Okay, so we can also change the address, and you can also change the image as well. Okay, so I'm going to update the record that we just changed, and this employee, and we change her job role from receptionist to deputy manager. So another thing that we can do is to delete an employee's record. In this case, I don't want to delete, so I'm just going to go back to the list. And we can also use this link to gain access to this employee's metadata, or we can click on details, whichever one will do the same. So if I click on this, it will take me to the employee's metadata, so we can see the employee's full records, and also you click on the phone number. That will open up any telephone clients that you have on your machine. So I don't have any. And also we can send a payslip to the employee by clicking on this button, but we don't have a payslip yet, so we'll come back to that later. And also we have this navigation, which takes us back to the employee list. Click on this navigation, and that will bring us back to the employees list. So in this section, we can manage the employees records, we can add a new employee, edit employee, view the employee's details, and we can also delete an employee's records. Okay, and also you can click on this navigation to take you back to the home page. So now let's go to the payroll section. Click on payroll, click on new payment. So this user does not have access to the payroll section, so access is denied. So I'm going to log out this user and log in with another account. I'm going to log in with the manager's account. Okay, so the manager has been authenticated. So let's view the payment records. So these are the current payment that we have processed. So we can also go here and create a new payment. So access is denied to this manager, and that is simply because the manager can only view the payment records, but the manager is not in the right role to process payment. So processing of payments is left for the payroll administrators. Okay, so I'm gonna log this guy out, log the manager out, and log back in. Log in, payment records, and now let's try and process a payment. So I'm gonna process a payment for the employee we just added, Kevin Johnson. The month, we have the date selected by default, and the tax year 2019 to 2020. And this is simply because in UK the tax year spans 2 different years. Okay, the tax year starts from April to April the next year. Next, we need to enter the hourly rate, and also we need to enter the total hours that this employee has done. So for this month, this is the total hours that this employee has done, and here we have these default hours, and this is the contractual hours that the employee is contracted to do. So the excess hours will automatically be classified as overtime hours, and overtime has a different rate from the hourly rate. So let's compute a payment, compute and save. So our payment computation was successful. So the total earnings minus deductions will give us our net payment. Now, if you want to see the breakdown of this payment, which is the computation details, you have to click on this link. So this will take us to the computation details for this particular payment. So we have the employee's name and we have the national insurance number. Next, we have the date and hours section. So here we have the pay month, the hourly rate, year, date, and then we have 165, which is the total hours worked, and we have the contractual hours. So the difference between the hours worked and the contractual hours will be classified as overtime hours automatically. Now, the overtime rate will be a time and a half of whatever the hourly rate is. So 10 multiplied by 1.5 will give you 15. So the deduction section, we have the tax code, we have the tax amount and the national insurance contribution, and also this employee is not paying back student loan and no union fees simply because this employee is not a member of the union. So we have a logic that goes to the employee's record to check if the employee is paying back student loan or if the employee is a union member. So finally, we have this earnings section. So contractual earnings plus overtime earnings will give us our total earnings. Now the total earnings minus deductions will give us our net payment. And also we can actually go online and search for an income tax calculator. So I'm gonna use this one here, income tax calculator. So let's compare our values. So the total earnings, copy this, and I'm gonna put this here. That's the gross before tax, and our tax is 2019 2020. Okay, this is the amount the employee earns every month. So that is because this payroll system is based on a monthly payment. Age under 60, that is correct. And then I'm going to calculate. So in the summary section, the total earnings is £21,060 per year for 2019 and 2020 tax year. And the take home is £17,858. So the monthly income for this employee is £1,488. Okay, and if we compare that to our own value, we got £1,488.08. So what this employee takes home, the net payment is the same with the monthly income we got from this random calculator online, and that is for this tax year. So the logic that we have used is similar to the logic that they have used here as well. And also we can compare our tax. The tax paid is £143, and the national insurance contribution for this month is £124. So let's compare that to what we have here. We have £124 and we have 142.60. You can approximate that to 143 for the tax. So the values are the same with what we have with this random calculator online. So yeah, this is the tax details for this employee. So next I'm gonna go back to the payroll list, and another thing that we can do here is to preview this employee's payslip. So I'm going to click on preview payslip. So this is the employee's payslip. So next we can actually use the Windows print system to print this payslip. Now instead of going to preview and printing the payslip and then going to the post office to send the payslip through the post office, So most companies will rather generate a PDF of your payslip and email that to you. That is how I get my payslip, and that is how most people get their payslip in recent time. So in this case, we have implemented the payslip PDF. So you can click on this payslip PDF, and that will generate a payslip PDF for this employee. And we can click that and open up the payslip for this employee. Now the next step will be to send this payslip by email. So now that we have this payslip, we can actually go to this employee's records, all employees, and click on this employee's metadata, and we can, by the click of a button, we say send payslip, we click this button, that will automatically open up any email client that is configured on your machine. So once the email client is open, it will automatically add the email, the subject, and also the message body. So the only thing you have to do is to attach a payslip. So we have our payslip attached, and the next thing, you just send the payslip to the employee. So I'm going to close my email client because this email is not a valid email, so I can't send that. So I'm going to go back to the home. So also, after the development of this application, we took this application and deployed it to Azure Cloud. So I'm going to open up this same application in Azure. So this is the same application running in Azure. I'm going to refresh. Now you also notice that the payment we processed on our local host was also available on our remote application on Azure Cloud. And that is simply because both the local application and the remote application that is running on Azure Cloud, both of them are pointing to the same database. Okay, so we have our local database here, and we also have our remote database, and this is our remote database, and this is also hosted on Azure Cloud, and that is why the whole data is in sync. So another thing that you will notice is my total earnings, all my currencies are showing in US dollars instead of British pounds. So for the payment records on my local host is showing my currencies in British pounds, but the remote application is showing my currencies in US dollars. Okay, and that is simply because when I deployed this application, let's go to Azure Cloud. So this is the web-based application here. So I should have changed this to UK South. Okay, what we have, I deployed my database somewhere here in UK South, and my application, my web application, I deployed it somewhere here, which is thousands of miles away. Okay, but it doesn't make much difference simply because Azure Cloud is a worldwide solution. So yeah, these are all the things we'll be doing in this project. So that's it for the demo. When you're ready, queue up the next video and let's do this. Now let's look at some of the tools that we need for this project development. So we are going to need the SQL Server. So I'm going to navigate to www.microsoft.com, www.microsoft.com, go to All Microsoft. Under Business, I'm going to go to Data Platform. We need Try SQL Server. Under the Download tab, we have the SQL Server on-premises and we have the cloud-based SQL Server. But what we actually need is the free specialized edition. Under here you have two options. You can go for the SQL Express or you could go for the developer option. So you can actually go for any of these two free versions. So you just go there and download the one that you need. Okay, now under tools you also need the SQL Server Management Studio. So you click on SQL Server Management Studio and it brings you here. You also need to download the SQL Server Management Studio. Now the next tool that we need would be the visualstudio.com. So you can click on download and we have Visual Studio 2019. We have the following options. You can go for the community edition, you could go for professional if you have the money, or the enterprise. But for our purpose, we are going to use the free edition, which is the community edition. Click on download and your product will start downloading. Okay, so I'm not going to download this because I already have it on my machine. So if you run this, it will take you to Visual Studio Installer. So Visual Studio Installer is gonna look like this. So that's my Visual Studio installer. I have Visual Studio 2017 and the Visual Studio Enterprise Edition 2019 preview. And if I click on modify, for example, so that will list all our workload. So for this project, you will need ASP.NET and web development. So you have the ASP.NET core here. So you have to select this. You can also select the .NET desktop development. You can also select these, but I do C++ as well. So I do select the C++ as well. And also you can select the .NET Core cross-platform development. So you should also be aware of the space you have on your machine. So the more options you select, the more space you will need. So you always go to your hard drive to check the space that you have on your hard drive. So you're going to go to your hard drive and go to properties. Now when you come to your hard drive properties, you will make sure you have enough free space before you start downloading. Otherwise you'll run into issues. And the installation is straightforward. So once you select, then you can click on install and everything will start installing. So I'm not going to do that because I have that already. So I'm just going to close here and close my Visual Studio installer. So I also need to cancel this out. Cancel. I'm not installing that because I already have Visual Studio. So if you already have Visual Studio and you want to update the SDK, so all you have to do is to go to .net and that will take you to where you can download the SDK. So now if I click on download, so that will show me the latest .NET Core SDK that we have. So currently the latest stable edition is the 2.2 and that's what I'm going to use for this project. So by the time you'll be watching this video, there might be .NET Core 3.0 or higher. So I'm not going to download this because I already have this on my machine. So if you need the .NET Core SDK 2.2, you will click on download the .NET Core SDK. The SDK also contains the runtime. Alternatively, you can come to the advanced option to look at all the available .NET Core downloads. Click on this, it will take you to this window and it shows you that the latest as of the recording of this video is .NET Core 3.0, but it's not recommended for projects and it is still in the preview stage as of the recording of this video. And the recommended version that you need for your project is the .NET Core 2.2, and this is what I'm going to use. Now you can also check the available .NET Core SDKs installed on your machine by going to, so if I say .NET list SDKs, This will list all the available .NET Core versions on my system. So the latest edition that I have is the 2.2. The same thing, you can check the run times, and that will show you the available run times on your machine. So the latest that I have is the 2.2.0. So back to our downloads. So the next tool that we need is the Git. I'm going to use the Git for my version control. So Git is a distributed version control system, and I'm going to use that to track changes on my project files. So to get Git, you have to go to git-scm.com, and then you have to download Git from here. So you can download, this is the latest version, and you can click on that and start downloading it on your system. I already have Git, so I don't think I should download this. I already have Git on my machine, so if I go to Git and check the version, I have the version 2.19. I can also update this version. So to update to the latest version, I can go here and click on download and run. So I'm just going to follow the default settings and run this latest edition. You can actually change the location for Git, but I'm just going to install it on the default, which is under my program files, and I'm just going to go next, 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 next. If you want to run Git on Bash only, you select this option. Otherwise, you can select this option, which allows you to run Git from other command lines and other third-party softwares. And I'm going to say next, 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 and then install. So my installation is complete, and I'm just going to finish. So I'm going to go back to my command line and check the current version of Git version, and that has updated to 2.22.0. And you can check the location where this is installed by saying where git.exe, which is the executable file, and that will tell you that the Git is installed under your program files. Okay, so clear screen and exit out of here. If you want to use the same command line emulator that I'm using, which is this one here, is called Cmder. If you want to use the same, you have to go to cmder.net. Okay, and then you can download the full version. So the full version also comes with Git for Windows. So you can actually come here and download this Cmder, which will also give you Git by default as well. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we will look at the software architecture for this project. See you in the next video. Now let's look at the structure of our web-based application. We are going to have a user interface, and the user interface will only grant access to authenticated users. Now these authenticated users can be further restricted using a role-based authorization. So we're going to talk about this when we get to the authentication and authorization module. So in this diagram, we have four main layers. We have the presentation layer, we have the services layer, we have the persistence layer, and we have the entity layer. The presentation layer will contain all our UI components. Now in this solution, we are using MVC pattern. So our presentation layer will contain our models, our views, our controllers. Now the models that we are going to have in the presentation layer is going to be our view models. So these view models will be part of the presentation layer. So our view model will represent the data we want to present in the view and also the kind of data we want to retrieve from the view. In the next layer, we have our services layer. Our services layer will contain all the implementation of our business logic and all the related queries. So in this layer, we will have our implementations. We will also have interfaces. Now, you will notice that there is a separation of concern between the interfaces and the implementation. And that is simply because it's advisable to always separate interfaces from their implementation. So in this case, what we are going to do is to take our implementation and wrap that up in a different namespace. So we put that in a higher namespace hierarchy from where the interfaces are. Okay, so the controllers in the presentation layer, we only have access to the interfaces. So the interfaces will serve like a contract of what our controllers can do. And then the implementations will be served using the built-in dependency injection in ASP.NET Core. Now the next layer that we have is the persistence layer. The persistence layer will contain the entity framework called DB context. It will contain all our seed data, and also all our migration files will be contained within the persistence layer. And finally, we have the entity layer. The entity layer will contain all our business objects. So these entity layers are sometimes called domain models. Okay, so they're nothing but our POCO classes. And finally, we are going to have our data platform, because this is a data-driven application. So what we have chosen for this project is SQL Server. During the development, we are going to use a local SQL Server, and then during deployment, we are going to use an Azure Cloud SQL Server. So at that point, any data that we have in our local SQL Server, we are going to migrate that data into an Azure Cloud SQL Server. Now you will also notice that we have these thick blue lines, and I kind of use these thick blue lines to indicate our dependencies. So the presentation layer will take a dependency on the entity layer and the services layer. The services layer will in turn take a dependency on the entity layer and the persistence layer. And finally, the persistence layer will take a dependency on the entity layer only. So these dotted lines here indicate our HTTP request and response, things like HTTP GET and HTTP POST. Then down here, this dotted line represents the persistence of data to and fro our data store. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we will jump straight into Visual Studio and start creating these different layers within our solution. See you in the next video. Now to start creating my project, I'm going to click on Visual Studio. So I want to create a new project, so I will click Create a New Project. And the project that I need is ASP.NET Core Web Application. So I'm going to select this template. So I'm going to click on Next. And the name of my project, I will call this Pay Compute. You'll notice the name of my project is the same with the solution name. You can change this if you want, but I'm going to leave it the same. And also I'm going to check this box simply because I want my solution and my project to be in the same directory. Another thing that you can do is also to change the location where your project will be saved. So on my local disk, I have a folder called projects, so I'm going to save inside this folder. So I'm going to create this project now. Click on create. My framework is .NET Core. The version is 2.2. So the template that I need here is a web application MVC, model view controllers. For my authentication, I need individual user accounts. So I'm going to change this to individual user account and click OK. I'm going to leave the rest of the settings as the default and click on create. So I'm going to close this and go to my Solution Explorer. So this project that I have already will represent the presentation layer. So I need to add other projects under this solution. So I'm going to right click on my solution and go to add new project. And I need a .NET Core class library. Type in class, select that, click on next. So I'm going to call this paycompute.services. Create this project in the same location. I also need another project for my persistence layer. So I'm just going to right click on the solution, add new project. I need a class library, .NET Core class library, and click on next. And I'm going to call this paycompute.persistence layer. Click on create. So I need to add one more project to this. Right click on solution, add new project. It's going to be a .NET Core class library. Click on next, paycompute.entity. So this will represent my entity layer. Click on create. We have the presentation layer. Let me collapse this. We have the presentation layer. We have the entity layer. We have the persistence layer and the services layer. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll look at how these layers depend on each other. See you in the next video. So the next step in this project is to add references. We have the presentation layer, which takes a dependency on the services layer and the entity layer. So I'm going to right click on this project and add a reference. So it's going to take a dependency on the entity layer and the services layer. Click OK, expand this, go to my dependencies, click on project, and we have the paycompute entity and the paycompute services. So the next is the services layer. So the services layer will take a dependency on the persistence layer and the entity layer. So right click on services layer, add a reference, and we need the entity layer and the persistence layer. Click OK. Expand the services, expand dependencies under projects. So here we have our two dependencies. Finally, we have the persistence layer, and the persistence layer only takes a dependency on the entity. So I'm going to right click here and add reference, and I only need to add the entity and click OK. So expand this, go into dependencies, expand the projects, and we have the entity layer only here. So finally, we have the entity layer, and the entity layer is not taking any dependencies on any of the other projects. So I'll leave this one the way it is. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll go to the entity layer and start creating our domain models. So the first business object that I need is going to be our employees. So I'm going to right click here, add a new class. So my class, I will call this employee and click add. So I don't need this class 1, so I'm just going to right click and delete class 1. So my class will be public, and my properties, I'm going to start with an ID, getter and setter. The next property that I need, I'm going to call this employee number, and it's going to be a string. So after that, I need first name. It's going to be a string as well. I'll also need a middle name. You can use the shortcut prop tab. So string middle name, last name, we'll also need to store the full name as well. So other properties, I'll need the employee's gender, I'll also need a string to store the image URL. So the next property is going to be date of birth, and it's going to be a datetime DOB. We also need to store the date the employee joined. So I'm going to call this date joined. So we also need the employee's job role. So I'm going to call this public string, and let's call this designation. The next property that I need is the email. So another property will be the national insurance number. National insurance number. So this is the same with social security number for those of you in the States. So another property that I need will be the payment method. Payment method. So the type is payment method, and the name of this property, I'm still going to call it the same, payment method. So this type doesn't exist at the moment, so we create that later. So we also need to check if this employee is paying back student loans, so I will have a type called student loan. And the property name is going to be student loan as well. We also need to know if this employee is a union member, so I will have a type called union member. So another property that I need is the employee's address. I'm going to call it address. So the next property that I need is the city. I'm going to call it city. And then the employee's postcode. Now the next property that I need will be a collection. And I'm going to use an IEnumerable of type. I'm going to call this type payment record. So I'm going to call this payment record. So this is a collection, so I'm just going to call it payment records. So you can also use an I collection here. You can use I list, you can use a list. For me, I prefer an I enumerable. So I also need to add some data annotations. So I need to add a data annotation to the employee number and make this required. Control period and also the first name is also required, and I'm going to set the maximum length for the first name and make that 50. The middle name is not compulsory, but I'm still going to put a maximum length of 50 on the middle name, and the last name, just going to copy this and use the same data annotation for first name and last name. So I'm just going to go down to national insurance number and make this required. I'm going to go to the address and I'm going to make the address 150. And postcode is also required. So for this employee domain model, these are all the properties that we have. In the next video, we will create the payment record domain model. See you in the next video. Now the next thing that I need to do is to create this payment record class. So I'm just going to go back to my entity layer and add a class. And I'm going to call this payment record. I'm going to make this public. And I'm going to add some properties. The first property that I need obviously will be an ID. So the next thing that I need to do inside this payment record is to create a relationship between the payment record and the employee class, and that is simply because each payment record will relate to a particular employee, and also the employee will also have a collection of payment records. So the relationship that exists here is one to many. So one employee can have many payment records. So the next property that I need is the employee ID. So I'm going to call this employee ID. And this is simply because each payment record will belong to a particular employee. So I also put in a navigation property here. Employee, and I'll call it employee. So this will be my navigation property to the employee class. This is a setter. I can also decorate this employee ID with a foreign key data annotation by saying foreign key, and the foreign key is coming from the employee. We will need the employee's full name, we will need the national insurance number. I'm going to call it Nino. And I also need payment date. There's a date time, and I call this pay date. I also need payment. So I also need a tax year. So I'm gonna call this tax year, and I'm gonna call it tax year as well. So another property that I need would be my tax code. I will need an hourly rate. Hourly rate. So another property that I need is the hours worked, which is also going to be decimal. I will need contractual hours. I will also need overtime hours. Overtime hours. I will also need contractual earnings. Okay, contractual earnings. I need overtime earnings. Overtime earnings. Another property that we need is a tax. We also need national insurance contribution. So I'm going to call this NIC. And that stands for National Insurance Contribution or Social Security Contribution. So the next property is union fee. These are going to be our deductions. So I'm going to make this union fee optional, and that is simply because you will have employees that don't belong to the union. Okay, so a union fee will not apply to those employees that do not belong in the union. So I'll make that optional. So the next property that I need is student loan. I'm going to call it SLC, and that stands for Student Loan Company. That's where your student loan comes from, and that is where you do your repayment. I'm going to make this optional because the student loan repayment will not apply to all employees. So I'm going to make this nullable. So this is another way you can make it nullable. This is the short form, and you can also use this. So another property that I need would be the total earnings. Total earnings, get a setup. And then we'll have a total deduction. Total deduction. Finally, we'll have the net payments. Call it net payments. So these are all the properties that I have for now. So I also need to add some data annotations to my decimal values to avoid truncation. So this column type name is equal to money. So I'm just going to copy this, copy. Total deduction is money. Total earning is money. The student loan is money. Union fee, that's money. The national insurance is also money. The tax is money. Overtime earning is money. Contractual earning is money. And then the overtime hours. So the overtime hours is not money. The overtime represents decimal hours. So I'm going to put a decimal here. And so I'm going to use the default, which is 18 and 2. And 18 represents the scale and 2 represents 2 decimal points to the right. And I'm just going to copy this now because I need it. Copy contractual hours. These are decimal hours. Hours worked is also decimal hours. So the hourly rate is money. So the hourly rate is money. Could be $10 per hour, £10 per hour. We can also add this class in this video. So I'm just going to quickly go to my entity layer and add a new class. And I'm going to call this tax year. Tax year. Make this public. So the tax year will contain only 2 properties: public integer ID, getter and a setter, and then a string. So I'm going to call this year of tax. So in my payment records, I still need to add the tax year ID. Okay. The tax year ID. So I call this tax year ID. The getter and the setter. Foreign key. So this will represent a foreign key for the tax year class. So I can also add more data annotations here. Maximum length. Control period, data annotation, the maximum length, make that 100 for the full name. So that's it. These are all the properties that we need for this payment record. And also the tax year class, we have the following properties. So the next task that we have is to resolve these issues here. So I'm just going to generate these types. Control period again. Generate that class as well, and control period again. So I'm just going to go back to the entity layer, and these are the classes that were generated. We have the payment method. So the payment method, I'm actually going to use, instead of a class, I'm going to make this an enum. Okay, enumeration. So the payment methods that we need bank payments. So another payment method could be cash. You can also get paid by check. So that's it for this one. The next one is the student loan. The student loan. So the student loan is going to be an enum as well. Enum, paying back student loan. Yes or no. Save that. And the next one is going to be union membership. An enum as well. No. So these are the enums that we are going to have. So I'm going to use these enums for my selectable option. If the employee is a union member, we select yes, otherwise no. If the employee is paying back student loan, we say yes, otherwise we select no. And payment method, we have 3 options here. Okay. So these are all the entities that we need for this layer. In the next video, we will go to our persistence layer and start creating our application DB context. So the next step that we need to do is to create our application DB context. But another thing that you will notice is that we already have an application DB context within the data folder. So in the data folder, we have this application DB context. So we have this application DB context here simply because we enabled identity with our MVC template. So identity is a simple authentication system that is baked into ASP.NET Core. So instead of creating another application DB context, what I'm going to do is to copy this particular one. I'm going to copy this and then move that to my persistence layer. I'm going to paste that here. And I have my application DB context here. So now I can go in here and delete this one. I can also delete the migration files as well. I'm not going to need that. So open up my application DB context. And the first thing I need to correct is the namespace. So this should be paycompute.persistence. And also I need to bring in entity framework core from NuGet, and also I need to bring in ASP.NET Core identity. Okay, so let's do that now. I'm going to right click on my persistence project and go to manage NuGet packages. I'm going to go to browse and I need to bring in my identity dot ASP.NET Core dot identity dot entity framework core. So this is the version that I need, 2.20, and I'm going to install this. Click OK. Accept. So that is done. So I also need to bring in Microsoft.entity framework. So I need to bring in Microsoft.entity framework core.SQL server. Install. Okay. Accept. So that is done. And I also need to bring in entity framework core.tools, which will allow us to run our migration commands. I'm going to select this one and install. So I'm going to go back to my application DB context, and all those red lines has been resolved. So the next thing I need to do is to bring in the properties of the application DB context. So the application DB context will represent our database, our properties will represent our tables. So the tables that I need, DB sets. First one is the payment records. Payment records. So I need to bring in the using statement. So this property name will be called payment records. So we also need a table for the employees. DB set. And bring in the employee entity, and I'm going to call this employees. So the other table that I need to bring in is the tax year table. So DB set tax year. So these are the tables that we need in our database. So the next thing that we need to do is to configure our connection strings. So our connection string is found inside. So our connection string is found inside the appsetting.json file. So I'm going to double click on this, and this is my connection string. So the first thing I need to do, I need to change the database name, which is this name here. This name is too long, so I'm just going to change this. So this is my database name, so I'm going to change that to pay compute database. And also I need to change this server name. So I'm going to fire up my SQL Server Management Studio. So this is my server name. So I'm just going to copy this, copy, connect. So currently we have 3 databases here. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio, and then I'm going to paste in the server name. Okay. So that's my server name. So this is my connection string. And finally, I need to go to my startup to make sure everything is okay. So instead of referencing this paycompute.data, we need to reference the persistence layer. Okay, because we moved our application DB context. So in the startup file, I need to reference the persistence layer there. So I'm just gonna take out this. So this should be paycompute.persistence, because this is where our application DB context is. Okay, so I think we are ready for migration. I'm gonna go back. So I'm going to build this solution to make sure we don't have any issues. So our build is successful, no issues. So the next thing I need to do is to run my migration. If you don't see your package manager console here, you have to go to Tools, from Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and click on Package Manager Console. Okay, so here the first thing you need to do here is to select your default project, and my default project for this migration is the persistence layer. This is where our application DB context is. So I'm going to say add migration, and I'm going to call this initial migration, and press enter. So we have the following migration file. In our persistence layer, we now have a folder called migrations. The next step will be to update our database. So I'm going to say update database and press enter. Package manager. So this is done. I'm just going to go to my SQL Server Management Studio. So currently we have the following databases. I'm just going to refresh my database folder, refresh, and now we have the pay compute database. Expand this database and check all our tables. We have all the identity tables, and we also have our own tables, which is the employees, payment records, and tax years. Okay, we have successfully created our database. In the next video, we will go to the services layer and start writing some of the queries that we need for the employee module. See you in the next video.